We'll be unsealing the complaint if it hasn't been already. It has much more details than what we've gone over today in there, and that'll be available to you. At this time, we will take a few questions.
How did RenderNet start?
Okay, we'll start there.
How did RenderNet start the fire? And in the investigation, as investigators spoke to him, what did he specifically say was the reason he didn't stay?
I'm not going to get into his specific statements. I can tell you ATF has determined that the fire was ignited with an open flame. Yeah.
Did this gentleman ever live in the Palisades, have any direct connection to the Palisades? Was he familiar with these trails, this area?
Yeah, he was familiar with this particular neighborhood, and he had a friend who lived in this neighborhood. So he knew this neighborhood.
He never specifically lived there?
He was a resident of Southern California. Do we know what city he lived in? Or? Okay. Yeah, he actually did live in Palisades, and he was familiar with the neighborhood in which this started.
We know that
the
fireworks.
word arson?
Yes, is arson. Yes.
We know that fireworks.
Okay, let me go here.
Do you know what was the protocol taken around the initial fire on New Year's Day? Was there precaution taken to try and make sure that fire was put out properly? And that's quite a
Yeah.
between when that ended and then the next fire.
Yeah, we're not going to get into the full fire response. I'll just tell you the fire department did respond, and they don't say they put out fires, they suppress the fire. So they use the best of their abilities at that time to suppress it. Like we said, there was dense vegetation. The fire went underground, and, I'm not a fire expert, but there's only so much apparently you can do about that. So it did smolder there until a week later, in which the winds picked up and reignited. So that's our understanding of it started. Let me go over here.
So did he move to Florida after this?
He relocated, yes.
Can you say a little bit more about what he was doing there? If he had been living in Palisades, was he camping? Was he hiking? Was he...
He just finished an Uber drive. So he just dropped someone off in that vicinity on an Uber drive. He was an Uber driver. He dropped someone off. He was in this neighborhood, and he was, this is New Year's Eve, so it was around midnight, and he went up to this hilltop. And at some point up there, around 12 a.m., he ignited a fire.
Residents that we spoke with reported and had video of fireworks during that same period of time. Initially, the belief was it was a group of kids that were there. Are you saying that the suspect here potentially set off those fireworks? You're saying open flame?
We have no evidence that any fireworks were set off in this area at the time the fire ignited.
Does he have prior criminal history, and has he been cooperative in this process?
Does he have his criminal history?
Did he show remorse at all?
Does he have criminal history? Yeah, he does not have criminal history. We're not going to get into his specific statements. We are going to tell you, though, that he did speak to us and he made false statements. So that we will confirm.
What about motive? You do have something from
Yeah.
the phone that you shared, any indication of what motive?
We're not going to get into motive right now because we're going to have to prove this case in court in front of a jury, and we don't want to get into that right now. We are laying out the information we have in the complaint. The evidence is based on, you could see some of the key evidence, including the fact that he was the only person in this location at the time this fire ignited. We have no other indication that any other person was there. There were no fireworks at the time. We have several cameras in the vicinity that are there designed to detect fires, and this fire was detected almost right away by those sensors. So there's no indication of fireworks or other things that would have started this. He was the only person there. You heard about this music video and song he would listen to, which had imagery of fires. And then do we have the image up? Are we having trouble with that? And you could see some of his thought process in the months leading up, where he was generating some really concerning images up on ChatGPT, which appears to show a dystopian city being burnt down. So more evidence will come out at trial, but we're not going to preview the entire case at this time.
Welcome, everybody. It's time to do it live. We've got some breaking news. Now, I was aware of this for some time, and of course, these things I have to keep close to the vest. This isn't the first time I've had to do that. Now, I am filming outside of my studio. We're in my kitchen, so forgive me if my wife barges in at some point to make me some delicious meal, but we got to go over this because we got breaking news. So it doesn't matter where we are, what we're doing. We got to do it live. So what is the breaking news? The breaking news is we were right all along. Now, Alexander Robertson, in his premier lawsuit for the Palisades Fire, he had already told us this was a rekindle. It was a holdover ignition from January 1st, New Year's Eve. Now, the only wiggle room there was nobody was 100% certain what ignited that original fire. We knew it was an individual, okay? We knew that it wasn't power lines. The original assumption that it was fireworks because it was just after midnight on New Year's. So that was the most reasonable answer. Now, that's changed. There's no evidence of fireworks. However, it was 100% spot on. The Lockman fire was the source of the Palisades fire. It was not properly extinguished. It extended past the Lockman fire burn scar and rekindled under the predicted January 7th winds and then became the Palisades fire. Now, we have this suspect in custody. He was arrested in Orlando. He was an Uber driver. He lived in Southern California. He knew the area well. So they're not saying necessarily, let me get this switch. They're not necessarily saying that he was a resident of the Palisades, but he is a resident of SoCal and he had friends in the Palisades. When he ignited the Lockman fire, he had just dropped off a couple of people. And we have some information in the criminal complaint about his state of mind at that point. Now, looking at the guy, he just sort of looks like a filthy millennial douchebag. Now, obviously, fuck this guy, right? You know, those of you who've watched me for a long time, you know how I feel about arsonists and what should happen to them. One of the more egregious things is his fucking name, Jonathan Rinderknecht. This is it's so tough to like get out breaking information on this guy because his name is so stupid and long and difficult to spell and everyone's going to misspell it. So this is going to be a nightmare. Like, why couldn't he just be called John Smith? But anyway, this dude, Rinderknecht, he was apprehended in Orlando. So he had fled California for Orlando. It was probably a smart move, but as I've said multiple times, nobody escapes the dense mustache of justice. You guys don't believe me sometimes, but it's true. These people have methods, tools, and resources available to them of which you are not aware. And it can sometimes take a lot of time to comb through all of these things. But the amount of surveillance that they have is unbelievable. Okay. That's why I assured you that no one is going to escape the dense mustache of justice. And that has been proven. Now, this was a federal response. He's now going to court. I believe he's in court right now for the initial hearing. There's some interesting stuff from this guy. Now, we can't necessarily get into his state of mind, but there's stuff that we can infer. And this, I'm just going to tease, is maybe the most concerning thing. This is some art that he had AI create. And what does it depict? Well, it depicts something that we will describe in more detail later. But if you're looking at this and you look closely, I think you can start to infer what this is about. Okay? So the feds are not necessarily going to go out on a limb. You heard that in the video. They're not going to discuss motive. This is a criminal case. It's a complex criminal case. Okay? So they aren't going to go out on a limb and discuss motive, but we are. Right? Because we're not in court, we're just doing it live. Here's the thing. People think because they've arrested an arson suspect that he is now liable for that fire. And the people named in the lawsuit, like the city of Los Angeles, LADWP, and California, Gavin Newsom and California State Parks and Rec, that this gets them off the hook. This is not true. Okay. So I just want to start off really quickly and just remind you guys, this was always the operating thesis for the lawsuit, is that the Lockman fire, whomever ignited it, and they always suspected it was one person, it was an individual. It wasn't 100% certain if it were a deliberate act of arson, if it were fireworks or an accident, but they always knew that somebody ignited the Lockman fire that was not properly contained, and then it created the Palisades fire. So this changes nothing for the lawsuit. It changes nothing for the accountability of the Los Angeles Fire Department, the city of Los Angeles, and especially California State Parks and Rec. We will review some of this, and I'll remind you guys just how it is that you can have a suspect who ignited the fire, and yet California State Parks and Rec is still on the hook. So all this does is it buttresses the lawsuit. This does not refute anything in the lawsuit whatsoever. It only supports it. And the good news is this hermetically sealed wall at the Department of Justice that we've been complaining about for months now. I told you, the ATF concluded this a long, long time ago. I've been like teasing it and saying, I don't know why they're not releasing it. Well, this is the reason why ATF has not been releasing their results. They finally made an arrest. So the good news is, not only does this not invalidate anything in the lawsuit, this does not let the state off the hook, and I'll explain why, but now we finally have access to the ATF report. Okay, it's going to be limited because this is going to be an ongoing case. However, we are finally getting this evidence, and they have finally confirmed publicly this was a rekindle. It was a reignition of the Lockman fire. So this is what creates this complex legal structure where we have multiple people who are at fault and they will pay. I guarantee you that. So this is a shot in the arm for the lawsuit against the state and the city. And now you're starting to understand why it is that both the state and the city were not putting out their reports. Okay, so let's get into it. I've got access to the criminal complaint and we're going to go through it together. You guys ready? You might want to get some coffee. All right, let's see if I can do this properly. The summary of probable cause. A multi-agency investigation into the origin and cause of the massive Palisades fire in Los Angeles, California on January 7th has determined that it was a holdover fire, a continuation of the Lockman fire that began nearby early in the morning on January 1st, 2025. Although the LA City Fire Department quickly suppressed the Lockman fire on January 1st, unbeknownst to anyone, the fire continued to smolder and burn underground within the root structure of dense vegetation. We knew this, okay? This is a common thing. We knew that they did not properly extinguish the fire. Going on. On January 7th, heavy winds caused the underground fire to surface and spread above ground in what became the Palisades Fire. Palisades Fire caused widespread damage to the Pacific Palisades area of Los Angeles. The criminal investigation determined that the cause of the Lockman Fire and Palisades Fire was Rinderknecht. As explained below, there is probable cause to conclude that Rinderknecht maliciously set the Lockman fire. So they're not saying this was an accident. So this would preclude fireworks, which was kind of the operating theory, given that it started just after midnight. That seemed relatively reasonable. There was some video evidence that kind of looked like fireworks were coming from the Highlands neighborhood. They're claiming this was malicious. It was deliberate arson for the Lockman fire, which of course was only an 8-acre fire that was quickly extinguished. You're saying that Rinderknecht maliciously set the Lockman fire just after midnight on January 1st. He started the fire on land owned by the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority, MRCA, an organization that received federal funding. This is why it's important that Rick Scott and the U.S. Senate are investigating this. And this is what they're looking into, right? They're looking into the application misuse of federal funds in terms of California wildfires. So this all ties in. They received federal funding, but just as a reminder, this is Topanga State Park. This is Gavin Newsom's property. A week later, the same fire, then known as the Palisades Fire, burned federal property. Okay, so they're just talking about like basically having skin in the game. Rinderknecht's proximity to the Lockman fire. On the evening of December 31st, 2024, Rinderknecht was working as a driver for Uber. Bummer. Two passengers that he drove on separate trips between 10:15 and 11:15 p.m. that night later told investigators that they remembered that Rinderknecht appeared agitated and angry. Interesting. At approximately 11:28 p.m., Rinderknecht used his iPhone to access YouTube to listen to the song entitled Unster und Tee by the French artist Jasmin. I have reviewed an English translation for the French lyrics for the song, and the theme of the song is despair and bitterness, and smoking weed, by the way. During his interview on January 24th, 2025, Rinderknecht admitted he was fluent in French. He grew up in France. Pay attention to that, guys. We've got fucking Euro trash coming and destroying our cities. Google records indicate that Rinderknecht had listened to the same song 9 times in the previous 4 days. He was basically working himself into a trance. The music video for the song shows the main character, Jasmin, lighting things on fire. Google records indicate that Rinderknecht had watched the music video 3 times in the previous 4 days. Now, do any of you guys know this? Do you guys know what this song is? Do you know this artist at all? Because, you know, look, I couldn't care less about French rappers. But why don't we like pull up this video and see what they're talking about? How's that sound, guys? Let me know if you can see this. This is the music video that they're talking about. Uns der und te. Clip officiel. I need my homegirl Kristen here to help me translate. So I'm just gonna speed this up and we'll just watch. This is the music video for the song that Rinderknecht was playing when he walked up to the into Topanga State Park and started this fire on New Year's Eve. So he was listening to this song repeatedly, like 9 times in the time leading up to the fire. And it's just kind of a generic video. I don't know. Here's the thing. I've gone over the lyrics. I wouldn't infer too much from this, to be perfectly honest, because it's kind of just like a stoner song. But I'm curious to see if we can see like any of the. Okay, so he's sparking up a joint. That's not unusual. Okay, he's kind of on fire there. Oh, now he's got a wizard fire going. What's he going to do with the wizard fire? All right, so he's certainly using a lighter a lot. He's just lighting joints. But this is the theme song. This is the dude's soundtrack before he went and started the Lockman fire. So again, this is just sort of generic, shitty rap video. So I don't know. Okay, they're lighting money on fire. I don't necessarily think there's much to interpret from this. This is kind of just generic motifs from rap videos. Waving around burning money, smoking joints. I don't know. Personally, I wouldn't infer a lot from this. You guys are welcome to, but I don't necessarily see anything here that makes me think, oh yeah, this guy's for sure going to be an arsonist and he was inspired by this. I mean, this is, yes, there's some fire in this, but this is pretty, dude, I shot a video with like fire was the backdrop. I ain't starting fires. So anyway, that's just a little background on that, but there's some other stuff that's a lot more concerning, but we'll get into this. So let's see. Let's pick up. Google records indicate that Rinderknecht had listened to the same song 9 times in the previous 4 days. The music video for the song shows the main character lighting things on fire. Again, I think that's kind of thin. I wouldn't infer too much from that. Google records indicate that Rinderknecht had watched the music video 3 times in the previous 4 days. At approximately 11:34 p.m., Rinderknecht dropped off a passenger on Palisades Drive in the Pacific Palisades. As Rinderknecht later admitted in a recorded interview on January 24th, and as video footage from the neighborhood confirmed, he then continued driving alone eastbound up Palisades Drive towards the Skull Rock trailhead. Rinderknecht was very familiar with the area. He previously had lived in a house roughly 1 block away from the trailhead. Previously, so he wasn't, it seems to imply he wasn't a current Palisades resident. Rinderknecht told investigators that he had hiked along the Temescal Ridge Trail many times. At approximately 11:30 p.m., Rinderknecht parked his car at the Skull Rock trailhead, as video footage confirms. After parking, he attempted to contact a former friend who had lived in the same nearby house where Rinderknecht had lived via Facebook Messenger, but did not connect. There's bad cell service up there. Just part of the issue with some of the issues on the fire. As Rinderknecht admitted in his recorded interview, he then walked up the trail, which comprised a series of concrete switchbacks and drainage ditches, to where the trail connected to the Temescal Ridge Trail. A sign at the beginning of the trail stated danger and no fires or smoking. Rinderknecht then walked up a narrow dirt path to a small clearing at the top of the hill. The former friend of Rinderknecht, who lived in the nearby house, told investigators that he and Rinderknecht had spent a lot of time together at that small clearing. What were they doing? The clearing is sometimes referred to as the Hidden Buddha because it had a short, hollowed-out remnant stump from a wooden utility pole where people sometimes placed small Buddha figurines. Now, we've shown you that stump. It's in evidence in the lawsuit. So any of you guys who've watched my lawsuit live streams, you've seen that. Super Pav says, I only speak American. That's gosh darn right, Super Pav. We speak American on this channel. At approximately 11:54 p.m., Rinderknecht used his iPhone to again listen to the song entitled Uns der und te by the French artist Jossman. I keep pronouncing it like with a German accent. Dude, my French is terrible. A number of environmental sensing platforms, which included cameras, operated by the University of California, San Diego, captured data and video 24 hours of the day. The hillside, those are the alert wildfire cameras that we all know. The investigative team analyzed all the relevant footage from those cameras. The first indication of the Lockman fire was captured at 12:12 on January 1st. Just so you know, though, they're saying the first indication on camera. That doesn't mean that's when the fire was ignited, because as you all well know, with the weather conditions that were up there, it wasn't crazy like it was on January 7th. So it might take some time for a fire to get established. So it's certainly possible that that fire was actually started minutes prior to that. That's just the first time a camera was able to pick something up. Okay. It might be a distinction without a difference, but it does matter. You'll see in a minute. Footage taken from that, hold on, I'm lost here. Footage taken from that same camera 35 seconds earlier did not show a fire. Again, it doesn't mean that there wasn't a small ignition that was building up some steam. You know, it's a kind of a logarithmic curve, and it just, you know, wasn't necessarily seen on camera. A closer camera, approximately 0.2 of a mile away from the hidden Buddha clearing, first captured the glow of the fire at 12:12 a.m. Rinderneck attempted to call 911 at approximately 12:12. Now, this is an interesting wrinkle. So how do we know that this was arson if he's immediately calling 911, right? Why would he do that? Why would he call 911 from the scene of the crime if he's deliberately starting this fire? The call did not go through, most likely because he was out of cell phone range. The GPS data obtained from Rinderneck's iPhone carrier for that attempted call placed his iPhone slightly below the hidden Buddha clearing. Approximately 19 seconds later, at approximately 12:12, Rinderneck attempted call 911 again unsuccessfully. So he's desperately trying to get to 911 to report this fire. The GPS data for that attempted call was more precise and placed him in the hidden Buddha clearing. Okay, so they've triangulated exactly where he was when he made this call. He's clearly trying to call 911. So this doesn't seem like it was deliberate. It sounds like it was maybe just an accident. And he's like, oh shit, he's trying to report it, right? It's going to get more complicated. The UCSD video footage indicated the fire grew quickly. Footage from a camera approximately 6.5 miles away first captured the fire at 12:13. Approximately 3 seconds later, at approximately 12:13, Rinderneck again attempted unsuccessfully to call 911, again from the hidden Buddha clearing. So he is staying at the scene of the crime, desperately trying to call 911. How can we say this is deliberate arson? 2 other cameras also captured footage of the growing fire at 12:13 a.m. Rinderneck again attempted unsuccessfully to call 911, again from the hidden Buddha clearing. The image below shows a still taken from raw footage from UCSD. Let me maximize this so you guys can see it. The bright spot in the upper left is the Lockman fire. And you can see just by the resolution of this camera, the resolution of this image, you can see what I mean, how this ignition may have been going for a few minutes and it was just like a few leaves that were starting to go, and this camera would not have picked that up, right? It would be a very, very small glow that I don't think this would have picked up. Okay, so their timeline is going to be approximate. Again, I might be splitting hairs here, but that is the reality. The bright spot in the upper left is the Lockman fire. Rinderneck's parked car is visible down the hill to the right. I'm going to maximize it, see if you guys can see that. Rinderneck then left the hidden Buddha clearing and headed down the hill toward his car, using the same trail that he had used to walk up the hill. GPS data obtained from Rinderneck's phone carrier showed that he attempted to call 911 several more times while descending the hill. So again, he's repeatedly calling 911. He didn't run away and then call 911. He's calling 911 from the point of ignition, okay? This doesn't sound like deliberate arson. This sounds like an accident. Or maybe he immediately regretted starting a fire. Like he was out of his mind and he snapped to it. He's like, oh shit, no. Because again, if you had any intention of doing this and getting away with it, why wouldn't you just run away and then report it as if you were, oh, I was just in the area and I saw it. He's doing it from the scene of the crime. That seems really odd. Now, at approximately 12:17, Rinderneck called 911 again, and for the first time, his call connected. So that's 5 minutes into the fire. GPS data for this call shows that he was almost at the bottom of the trail. So he's not like clear from the area, and he's talking to 911. On the call, Rinderneck reported the fire. By that point, a local resident already had reported the fire to 911. During the call, Rinderneck typed a question into ChatGPT app on his phone, asking, quote, "Are you at fault if a fire is lit because of your cigarettes?" ChatGPT's response was yes, followed by an explanation. So was this an accident? Did he toss a cigarette or a joint and light something on fire? Rinderneck then got into his car and drove away from the fire at around 12:20 a.m. His movements were captured by camera footage from nearby residences. On his way down Palisades Drive, he passed fire engines driving up Palisades Drive, responding to the fire. Rinderneck turned around and followed the fire engines to the scene. Rinderneck was driving at what appeared to be a high rate of speed. When Rinderneck arrived back at the base of the hill, firefighters were beginning to respond to the Lockman fire. Rinderneck later told investigators that he offered to help the firefighters fight the fire. Anyone will tell you, criminals will oftentimes offer to help investigators. This is how they catch a lot of murderers, by the way. They'll come back to the scene of the crime and they will try to offer help. It's this weird thing where it's like, it's Shakespearean. It puts off that vibe of, methinks the lady thou doth protest too much. But they think, oh, if I'm trying to help them, then clearly I'm not guilty. Okay, so that's a red flag right there. When Rinderneck arrived back at the base of the hill, he offered to help the firefighters fight the fire. Based on my training and experience, that would be highly unusual conduct. Rinderneck then walked back up the same trail that he'd used to climb up and down the hill earlier that night in order to watch the fire and the firefighters. Now, I've watched firefighters. That doesn't necessarily mean guilt, right? At approximately 1:02 a.m., Rinderneck used his iPhone to take 4 short videos of the fire and firefighters from the same trail. Again, we're all guilty of doing that. Dude, you know how many videos of firefighters I have? Got 92 terabytes. That night, the LAFD, assisted by the Los Angeles County Fire Department, used water drops from aircraft and hose lines, as well as hand lines dug by LA County Fire Department crews to attack the fire. Those are great crews. Suppression efforts continued during the day of January 1st, 2025, as firefighters continued to wet down areas within the fire perimeter. When the suppression efforts were over, the fire crews intentionally left fire hoses on site in case they needed to be redeployed. This is good. On January 2nd, 2025, LAFD personnel returned to the scene to collect the fire hose. It appeared to them that the fire was fully extinguished. Now, we have shots from this day. Here you can see the hoses are still on scene, and you have some Chinese tourists walking through the burn area. So this is an active fire zone. The state park has a responsibility to close off this area, not just to protect public safety, but to ensure that the fire is not going to reignite. Can you imagine the nightmare? Obviously, it did reignite, but could you imagine if it had reignited with these people stuck in the middle of it? It's could have been a potential nightmare. And the state has responsibility. And when you look at this, does this look like a properly contained fire? You can see unburned vegetation extending into the burned area. This is unacceptable. This is not a contained fire, okay? I don't know if they corrected this, but this is not a properly contained fire. All right, let's see if we can find our place back in this lawsuit. Man, it's like drinking out of a fire hose today. We got this from the same trail. All right. 2, the origin cause of the Lockman fire. If the Palisades Fire, federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies conducted a comprehensive investigation into the Lockman fire and the Palisades fire under the leadership of ATF's National Response Team. Investigators determined that the ignition area for the Lockman fire was an area located approximately 30 feet south of the hidden Buddha feature. The overall area for the ignition area was approximately 20 feet by 20 feet. The area does not include any hiking trails, but was accessible via a small depression or gully running downhill from the hidden Buddha clearing. Upon having conducted a systematic examination of the fire scene, which resulted in the development, testing, and elimination of multiple hypotheses, and having excluded these and other potential causes, the investigative team determined that the cause of the Lockman fire was incendiary, i.e. an intentional ignition of a fire in an area or under circumstances where or when there should not be a fire. The cause of the fire was determined to be the introduction of an open flame, likely a lighter. Okay, so this is why they're saying it wasn't fireworks. So they believe that it was a lighter that he was using to light a cigarette. Who knows? Likely a lighter to a combustible material such as vegetation or paper. This determination was based on a number of factors, including, as noted above, GPS data obtained from Rinderneck's iPhone carrier for his 911 calls, which within approximately 30 to 40 feet of the specific origin area at the time the fire was discovered. There is no evidence that anyone else was in that area at that time. As noted above, Rinderneck told investigators that he did not see anyone else from the top of the hill that night, as was corroborated by the available timing advance cell phone data. As noted above, the UCSD video footage indicated the fire grew quickly. The first indication of a fire was captured at 12:12. The same camera platform captured a much larger glow from the fire a minute later at approximately 12:13. Now, just to moderate this a little bit, the glow when you're watching night vision is substantially larger than the fire itself, okay? Because there's going to be a halo effect. So as long as you get just like a little bit of fire activity, you're going to get this bloom on camera. This does not necessarily indicate that it was spreading rapidly. And I will say, everyone's perception of rapid spread is a little bit different, but this fire was only 8 acres, okay? So it was a small fire. So no matter how quickly it was spreading, it couldn't have been that quick because it was only 8 acres. And, you know, it takes like 10, 15 minutes for them to respond. Okay. During his interview on January 24th, Rinderneck told investigators correctly that the Lockman fire began on the hillside below and south of the Hidden Buddha clearing. The investigators are not aware of any other way for Rinderneck to have known this non-public information other than having witnessed the start of the fire. Seems fair. You know, there's other ways to know that, but we'll just roll with it. During his January 24th interview, Rinderneck's statements about his location upon discovering the Lockman fire were inconsistent with the geolocation data obtained from his iPhone carrier for his 911 calls. Okay, let me just follow up on what I just said. They're saying the investigators are not aware of any other way for Rinderneck to have known this non-public information other than having witnessed the start of the fire. Here's the thing. Those alert wildfire cameras are public. So he could have easily watched that thing develop. So I'm not sure. I feel like that might be a weak point in the case. Maybe I'm missing something. Anyway, during his January 24th interview, Rinderneck's statements about his location upon discovering the Lockman fire were inconsistent with the geolocation data obtained from his iPhone carrier for his 911 calls. However, he was calling 911 on site. Why would he do that if it were deliberate and he was trying to get away with it? Rinderneck repeatedly told investigators that he first saw the fire and first called 911 after he left the Hidden Buddha clearing and walked down much of the trail towards his car. As noted above, the GPS data obtained from Rinderneck's iPhone carrier showed that he was standing in the Hidden Buddha clearing area when he first called 911. The GPS data also showed that after Rinderneck's first attempt to call 911 at approximately 12:12, he remained in the Hidden Buddha clearing until at least 12:13 when he made his fourth attempt to call 911. This indicates that Rinderneck watched the fire grow for over a minute while he remained in the Hidden Buddha clearing. I don't think that's suspicious. That in and of itself is not suspicious. Maybe he's trying to put it out, right? Maybe he's there and he's like calling 911. He's like trying to stomp it out, trying to figure out what he can do. He's trying multiple calls, realizing, hey, it's not going through. I got to go to where I know I have cell service. Okay. So this in and of itself is not suspicious. And I don't think they've yet established a genuine reason to infer that this was a deliberate act of arson and it was malicious, but it goes on. Okay, there's more evidence. Let's see. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. During his interview on January 24th, investigators noticed that Rinderneck's carotid artery would pulsate and become visible whenever they asked Rinderneck a question about how the fire started or who started it. These are human lie detectors. They're watching his neck and they're noticing that his carotid artery is bulging whenever they ask. Like if you're hooked up to a lie detector machine, they're monitoring these kinds of things, these subtle changes in your pulse, your blood pressure, your heart rate, stuff like that. They can see it in his filthy commie neck. Based on my training and experience, that indicates that Rinderneck was extremely anxious as to that issue. As noted above, Rinderneck watched the fire grow for over a minute while he remained in the Hidden Buddha clearing. Based on my training and experience, Rinderneck's decision to watch the fire grow for over a minute from the Hidden Buddha clearing, coupled with his subsequent statements to investigators that he was not in the Hidden Buddha clearing when he first saw the fire, is consistent with arson. Okay, this may be, but I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit. The idea that the only explanation for him staying there for a minute before going down is that it was arson. He was up there trying to call 911. This idea that he wouldn't be panicking and maybe trying to put it out, Has that been ruled out? The other side, okay, maybe he deliberately started it and then immediately regretted it. And then he was trying to put it out and wasn't successful, right? He wasn't able to stomp it out. That could be another explanation. I guess that technically still counts as arson, but just adding a little bit of nuance here. While Rinderknecht was descending the hill after Lockman Fire began on January 1st, he made a 3-minute screen recording on his iPhone. This is where it gets more complicated. He made a screen recording on his iPhone, recording himself attempting to call 911 several times and eventually connecting with 911 and asking ChatGPT, are you at fault if a fire is lit because of your cigarettes? Based on my training and experience and this investigation, this indicates that Rinderknecht wanted to preserve evidence of himself trying to assist in the suppression of the fire, and he wanted to create evidence regarding a more innocent explanation for the cause of the fire. Okay, but that's the thing. Wouldn't you want evidence? Does that be just because you want evidence because something might look suspicious? I would want exculpatory evidence if I did something accidentally, right? If I did something accidentally that I knew I'm going to be in deep shit for, I would also want exculpatory evidence. So maybe he had the presence of mind of he's trying to get through to 911. He's watching it spread faster. He's not getting through. It's going to get bigger and bigger. He's like, oh, fuck, dude, they're going to think I did this on purpose. And I'm not getting through. They're thinking I'm just letting it burn. Maybe I should record myself dialing 911 so I have proof that I tried. Okay? That could be an explanation for this. We have to entertain all these things because, of course, that is going to be his defense. This is going to be a criminal trial. He's entitled to defend himself. But these investigators are saying that based on their experience, which is certainly different from mine, I'm just inferring things that are just sort of logical. They have experience with this stuff. So it could be that they see this all the time. And that's a primary indicator that this was arson. Okay, moving on. You guys still with me? Super Pav says, I still don't see how this makes him responsible for the Palisades, only the Lockman. And we are going to get to that, brother. We are absolutely going to get to that. As noted above, after calling 911 and leaving the hillside on January 1st and then seeing firefighters driving a Palisades Drive to respond to the fire, Rinderknecht turned around, followed the firefighters to the fire, and filmed them responding to it. Based on my training and experience, arsonists sometimes call 911 to report the fires they have set, and arsonists sometimes like to watch firefighters respond to the fire that they have set. Again, the only wrinkle is he's calling from the scene of the crime. He didn't run down and maybe drive like half a mile away and then call. He did it from the point of ignition. Okay, so to me, that seems a little inconsistent. A witness who encountered Rinderknecht near the fire at around 1 a.m. told investigators that Rinderknecht, whom he did not know, told him that he had been down the hill at a house party when Rinderknecht first saw the fire. So he's trying to create an alibi. Based on this investigation, that was a false statement. Video footage from Rinderknecht's iPhone, timestamped on the afternoon of December 31st, show what appears to be a green barbecue-style lighter inside Rinderknecht's apartment. Investigators found what appears to be the same lighter in the glove compartment of Rinderknecht's car. So he was transporting that thing when they searched it on January 24th. Laboratory testing confirmed that a sample DNA found on the lighter from Rinderknecht's glove compartment matched a sample of Rinderknecht's DNA. Video footage from Rinderknecht's iPhone on January 1st at approximately 1:44 a.m. showed that Rinderknecht's glove compartment was open while he was driving. Okay, so this indicates that he took that lighter out of his house, put it in his glove compartment. Glove compartment was open when he was driving away. So we can infer that he deliberately put that lighter in there with the intention of doing something with it. Okay, so this is circumstantial, but it is evidence. During his January 24th interview, Rinderknecht admitted that he brought a lighter with him when he walked up to the Buddha. On November 1st, Rinderknecht asked the following prompt to ChatGPT. This is from 2024. Okay, so this is 2 months prior to the fire. Superpav says it seems like a cigarette or a joint. Yeah, it's no fireworks. This is an open flame, they're saying. Okay, now this is the background where we can start to infer more things about this young man and why I'm calling him a communist. The biggest threat to our country, by the way. On November 1st of 2024, Rinderknecht asked the following prompt to ChatGPT. I am 28 years old, and this just happened maybe like, I don't know, maybe like 3 months ago or something. Like the realization of all this, I literally burnt the Bible that I had. It felt amazing. I felt so liberated. On August 30th, 2024, so a few months prior, Rinderknecht wrote to a family member, burned the Bible I had, literally. Now, on this show, we quote scripture. Okay, I am a God-fearing man. My wife and I go to church, and I will say the people in our church are utterly incapable of ever doing stuff like this. They're patriots. They're not communists. Communism is a religion of the malcontents, and I believe that people who reject God have a God complex themselves. Right? That's why they're rejecting God. And I did for most of my life. I was an atheist. Okay. The reality is, you have to let go of your ego and recognize there is something bigger than you out there. And for me, my exposure to wildfire is what knocked that into my brain finally and knocked some sense into me. I saw that there is something way bigger than me out there. And it started to strip away my ego. And now I would never dream of burning a Bible. And I've been converted. Okay. So that's just my background. So when I read this, I can see what this person is going through. This is a young man full of self-loathing who feels slighted by society and does not recognize that his problems are meaningless. He believes his life is meaningless. And people who believe in God, people who read the Bible, do not believe that their life is meaningless. This is why true believers do not do stuff like this. On July 11th, 2024, Rinderneck provided the following prompt to ChatGPT. Quote, a dystopian painting divided into distinct parts that blend together seamlessly. On the far left, which is where he is, there is a burning forest. Next to it, a crowd of people is running away from the fire, leading to the middle. In the middle, hundreds of thousands of people in poverty are trying to get past a gigantic gate with a big dollar sign on it. On the other side of the gate, and the entire wall, is a conglomerate of the richest people. They are chilling, watching the world burn down and watching the people struggle. They are laughing, enjoying themselves, and dancing. The scene is detailed and impactful, highlighting the stark contrast. I want to show you guys the image that he's talking about. These are the images that he was generating, okay? Look at that. So this is showing, this is communism. This is communism, by the way. He's talking about all the rich fucks hiding behind their pearly gates while the poor people struggle to get in and they're all burning alive. That's what he's doing. This is commie gobbledygook. I'm so sick of this. Like, when are we going to start to acknowledge that this is a problem? Communism is the religion of the malcontents. Jesse Kelly always talks about this. You need people who hate everything, who are nihilists, in order to buy into this stuff. That's what you need, right? And here he is talking about the peasants, the poor peasants being burned out, knocking at the gates of the rich fucks who are enjoying themselves, watching them burn and die. They're laughing, enjoying themselves, and dancing. I want you guys to look through that imagery and tell me what you see. See if there's any details that you pick out. And what do you think the message is behind that? What's the message? Thousands of people in poverty trying to get past a gigantic gate with a big dollar sign on it. So this is anti-capitalism. On the other side of the gate, the entire wall is a conglomerate of the richest people. They are chilling, watching the world burn down, and watching the people struggle. They're laughing, enjoying themselves, and dancing. The scene is detailed, impactful, highlighting the stark contrast and the direct connection between the different parts of the world. And this is the image that prompt created. This is communism. This is all from before the Palisades Fire, Super Pav. This he was doing in August of 2024. No, July 11th of 2024 is when Rinderneck had ChatGPT produce this commie imagery for him. This is straight up commie propaganda. He's complaining about the rich-poor gap. And what are we to infer, given the significant wealth of the Palisades? If this is his mentality, that he believes that you have the poor huddled masses struggling against the wealthy elites who want them to all burn alive, and here he is setting fire to a wealthy elite community. or at least trying to. What can we infer from that, guys? I want your opinion. I want your opinion. So we have a guy who hates religion, burned his Bible, and is creating propaganda depicting the impoverished masses being shut out by the rich fucks as they all suffer and die, with a big $sign on their pearly gates as they laugh at the peasants dying. That's communist propaganda. So the prosecutors may not go out on a limb, but I will. This guy's a communist. This guy's a communist. Superpap says, so he tried burning down the Palisades, failed, but LAFD and Newsom let it happen by negligence. Crone Ranger is saying he's another mind-controlled, socially engineered drone. This is what communism produces, by the way. Mindless drones. And it thrives on the malcontent of oftentimes impoverished people. When you look at the history of communism, you're either trying to rally the industrialized poor, like in the Soviet Union, or the rural poor, like in China. And the reason why communism hasn't taken root in the United States is because even poor people in rural areas and poor people in industrialized society have it way better than anyone else on earth. There's not enough malcontent in this country to have enough steam or energy to generate a communist revolution. Thank God. But what have we noticed about modern society? We have a lot of malcontents around. We have a lot of people with significant grievances, even though they have flat screen TVs, life has never been easier, it's never been easier to get food, and yet they still have a complaint because their lives are empty and meaningless. And maybe if they weren't burning their Bible, and instead they were reading it and taking it to heart and letting go of their pride, maybe they would have more meaning in their lives. I'll stop editorializing. I'll stop editorializing. Sorry. Sequoia Grove says, bring it about the revolution by burning down a random upper middle class neighborhood. Yeah, that could be it. That could be it. Again, I'll admit I am going out on a limb. I'm assigning motive. I'm inferring motive. But this is communist propaganda. This is class warfare propaganda. Okay, there's no other way to interpret that. And if you guys have a different way of interpreting it, by all means, enter it in the chat, because I'm not a know-it-all, but this is what struck me. He's having ChatGPT produce commie propaganda for him. To do what with? I don't know. The Lockman fire burned approximately 8 to 10 acres before being suppressed by the LAFD. The fire started on property owned by the MRCA and spread into land owned by California State Parks, Topanga State Park. Now, just so you know, that the MRCA is it's subjugated to State Parks and Rec. The MCRA, man, there's a lot of typos in this. The MRCA is an organization that receives federal financial assistance. For example, over the past decade, the MRCA has received hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal funding and equipment from the National Park Service, United States Forest Service, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and the California Fire Assistance Agreement. California State Parks and Topanga State Park in particular also receive federal financial assistance. Okay, this is where we're starting to get some state liability, by the way. Okay, so those of you who think that because we found the source of the Lockman fire, that all of a sudden this is exculpatory for LA City and state of California, you are dead wrong. This does not in any way contradict anything in the lawsuits. It only supports it, okay? Alexander Robertson was the first person to push all of this evidence that it was a rekindle from the Lockman fire, okay? He was the one entering that into court. California State Parks, Topanga State Park in particular, also received federal financial assistance. For example, information provided by California State Park shows that Topanga State Park has received tens of thousands of dollars in the last few years from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. To do what with? Palisades Fire was first reported by a witness who lived in the area. The witness called 911 and took a photograph of the fire from his backyard at approximately 10:27 a.m. on January 7th. After extensive analysis, the investigative team determined that the specific origin area of the Palisades Fire was a burned out root structure at the base of dense vegetation approximately 20 feet south of the perimeter of the Lockman fire. The perimeter was the hand line dug by Los Angeles County Fire Department crews on January 1st along the south containment line of the Lockman fire. Now, just so you know, the LRA includes this area, okay? This is the local responsibility area, meaning this is LAFD's jurisdiction. However, you have a multi-agency response, and LA County is a contract organization for CAL FIRE. Okay, so instead of having CAL FIRE stations all over Los Angeles, instead of having that redundancy, CAL FIRE pays LA County to do brush response in Los Angeles County. So they are contract agency of CAL FIRE. Okay, everyone clear on that? We're going to show footage. This is the first image below is a photograph taken by drone after the Lockman fire, but before the Palisades fire, looking north. The second image shows the perimeter of the Lockman fire in red and the specific origin areas of the Lockman and Palisades fire. Those here are the images. Now, this is somewhat difficult to see. Let's see if you guys can look at this. So that red line shows the Lockman fire perimeter, and you can see there's an eyebrow. There's an eyebrow just above the Palisades fire origin, okay? And it's just below that eyebrow where they're saying that the fire burned underground in the root system and came up into there. Now, I would argue that's wrong. I would argue that's wrong, okay? Especially if you look closely, look at that eyebrow. Look at that unique feature of the control line right there where you have, now, anyone, who of you in the chat are familiar with wildland fire? What do we do with eyebrows? What do we do with them? Look at that eyebrow right there, just above where they're saying the origin of the Palisades fire was. I do not believe that this thing migrated underground, okay? I think they had a dirty line because we saw that dirty line in those images. They had an eyebrow, which is a serious vulnerability. Here's the image. This is their containment line. This is their containment line. I don't like that. To me, that's really sloppy, okay? Maybe they tidied this up, and so maybe we shouldn't rush to judgment based on this image. But as you can see, the hoses are still deployed. So we know that firefighters have already left. They've already walked away from it, so they felt confident this was contained. And they collected those hoses on the 2nd. So this was soon after the fire. This is not properly contained. And in this particular spot of the origin of the Palisades fire, you have this eyebrow. I believe that eyebrow reignited. That's what I believe. Intel Earth says green over black on the line causing it to spread. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's less likely that it was just in the roots. I think it could have been in a root ball, but I don't believe that it traveled underground 20 feet. I don't believe that. I have a hard time believing that. I find it more likely that it was smoldering in a root ball and then it extended into that eyebrow and then jumped through there. I could be wrong, okay? I could certainly be wrong. But clearly, they did not sufficiently wet this thing down. They didn't do proper mop-up on this thing. There's no other way to put it. I don't know how you can have this much, like this bad of a rekindle. I want you guys to study this image for a second. Excuse me, I gotta let my donkey out. All right, donkey secured. Now back to the dense mustache of justice. Sorry, I think man, the donkey is a hoot. So anyway, this was not a properly contained fire, and you know what? Let me see if I'm going to pull us into. I want to try to get a better resolution on this. So let's go to the actual complaint and see. Do they have the image in here? Where is that image? All right. Yeah, for some reason in Google Docs, it's being obnoxious. So what I'll do is I'll post this on my Twitter feed so you guys can look at the images in higher resolution. But Now, on to, does this provide exculpatory evidence for the state and for the city and for the fire departments who are involved? Sequoia Grove says, I'm curious if the guy knew anything about the winds in the forecast. I guess not, because why would you not just start the fire on the evening of the 6th or the morning of the 7th? Yeah, I think you're right on that. I think you're right on that. Intel Earth says, is it possible for the root ball to smolder and with the winds push up the plant, reignite above ground and spot across the line to become origin for the ball? Yes. And that's Intel. I think that's what happened. I think that's what happened. Because the thing is, if it's burning underground in the root structure, I'm just having a hard time understanding how the winds would rekindle something that's like deep in the roots like that. It would, I mean, it must have surfaced. And here's the thing that a lot of people don't know. People were reporting smelling smoke all morning in the Palisades. I have text messages from people, group chats, timestamped early that morning on January 7th saying, hey, you smell smoke? So people were smelling smoke. And it wasn't just the winds, you know, drifting ash. They were like legit smelling smoke and they couldn't see anything. So something was surfacing at that point. Something was surfacing. So there were, I think, a few hours where that thing was working its way up into becoming a full-on ignition and then probably spotted over the line. But some of that detail might be impossible to know fully. Look, at the end of the day, you saw in that video at the beginning of the stream where Attorney Asili was saying, you know, there's nothing you can do. I don't know how many of you guys are firefighters. Is there nothing you can do to make sure that the root structure is cooled off properly? Every time that I've watched mop up, when it's done properly, it is a very rigorous process where they're using tools to mix water into the root structure to essentially make soup out of it. There's also some other issues, okay? I got to be somewhat vague with this, but there are people within agencies or an agency, and I won't say specifically which agency, who wanted to patrol that fire. And that didn't happen. They wanted to patrol the Lockman Scar because, to Sequoia Grove's point, they were aware of the upcoming winds and they are aware of the possibility of a rekindle. And that didn't happen. Okay. So this comes into the culpability of these agencies. We've talked about this before. This is in the, hold on. Okay, here we go. The investigative team determined the Palisades fire was a holdover fire. Okay, if this is not definitive enough, this is what we've been saying since July, right? It was my first live stream on the amended complaint from Alexander Robertson that kind of set off this whole discussion in the first place. And from the beginning, Alexander was saying, yeah, this is a holdover ignition from the Lockman fire. Defined as a fire that remains dormant for a considerable time. Investigators determined that during the Lockman fire, a firebrand became seated within the dense vegetation and continued to smolder and burn within the root structure of the vegetation. This underground burning was not visible to firefighters in the aftermath of the Lockman fire and was not visible to members of the public who visited the hillside after the Lockman fire. We have pictures of that. The strong sustained winds and even stronger wind gusts in the area on the morning of January 7th created conditions in which the holdover of fire from the Lockman fire ignited additional fuels and spread, becoming the Palisades fire. In determining that the Palisades fire was a holdover fire, the investigator team ruled out other potential causes of the Palisades fire. So this is definitively a holdover ignition from the Lockman fire. So the lawsuit is 100% correct, and that's why this changes nothing for the lawsuit. It only buttresses the lawsuit. All of their legal arguments were predicated on somebody started the Lockman fire. The Lockman fire was not properly extinguished. Okay, so this is not news to Alexander Robertson or Spencer's attorneys. This is the case law that they're citing in the lawsuit, which shows that the state is still liable for this, okay? A negligent or wrongful act or omission of an employee of the public entity within the scope of his employment created the dangerous condition, or the public entity had actual or constructive notice of the dangerous condition under Section 832, a sufficient time prior to the injury to have taken measures to protect against the dangerous condition. Excuse me. To state a cause of action against a public entity under Government Code Section 835, a plaintiff must plead: 1, a dangerous condition existed on the public property at the time of the injury. 2, the dangerous condition proximately caused the injury. 3, the dangerous condition created a reasonably foreseeable risk of the kind of injury sustained. And 4, the public entity had actual or constructive notice of the dangerous condition of the property in sufficient time to have taken measures to protect against the dangerous condition. Okay, this is case law discussing the culpability of a government agency. In this case, Vedder versus Imperial County, where at a municipal airport in Imperial County, they had stacked up fuel at the edge of their property that got ignited by a fire, and then the fuel exploded and blew up somebody's business, a private business, outside of the municipal property. So even though an individual ignited that fire, because the government created this dangerous condition by stacking fuels, they are also liable. Okay, this is a part of it. So what are these conditions? A dangerous condition existed on the public property at the time of the injury. Now, Crone Ranger is saying also a week prior to the fire, there was discussion about a major wind event on the way. So they had plenty of time to understand that there was a potentially dangerous condition. We know we've had historic rekindles going like 1991, the Oakland Hills fire, the tunnel fire. That was a rekindle. So we know that this is a thing that happens. And we have people within an agency who felt the need to patrol the area in order to guard against a rekindle, and that didn't happen. Okay, so yes, they were aware of this dangerous condition. They also they had time. The public entity had actual constructive notice of the dangerous condition property in sufficient time to have taken measures to protect against the dangerous condition. They had a week to make sure that this thing was out. Intel Earth is asking, is there any way that handheld IR cams should have been used for mop up the days after? Yes. And apparently they didn't do that. I'm not 100% sure if that is protocol or not, but apparently they didn't do it. That's what's alleged in the lawsuit. Diane Cotter says stacking fuels, and this is 100% right. That's the other dangerous condition on state property, is they've not done any fuels mitigation on that property in 40 years. Like as we've seen, it's so overgrown in the Palisades, and that's the equivalent of stacking up fuel cans at the Imperial Airport. There's no difference, right? These are both flammable. We're well aware of the dangers posed by this stuff. So like, this is a historic fire area. I've shown you all the pictures like from 1978. And of course, adjacent to that in Malibu, we get even more frequent devastating fires. So they absolutely had constructive notice and plenty of time as to the dangerous condition on their property. So regardless of who started the fire, one who negligently stores gasoline and other highly combustible chemicals on his property or knowingly permits such negligent storage may be liable to others for a fire incurred loss, even though the fire was actually started by the negligent conduct of others. If an injury is produced by the concurrent effect of two separate wrongful acts, each is a proximate cause of the injury. This is 100% why the state is on the hook for this. Because in addition to that, this is from the State Park Manual. So this is from the 2024 California Department of State Parks and Rec Manual. Closure of fire damaged areas. This is their protocol for when there's a fire like the Lockman fire. All or a portion of the park unit may be closed when an unwanted wildland fire is threatening or burns on department lands. Areas of a park unit which have burned will remain closed until appropriate department staff have inspected the area and rectified any public safety, property, or resource protection issues. Does it look like it was closed? Does it look like it was closed? They have an obligation to close this area when there's a wildland fire. And here you have Chinese tourists just traipsing through the area, and you still got fire hoses deployed. So this isn't like several days after, like, oh, that thing's out. Dude, this is immediately after the fire. The hoses are still there. Now they could trip over those hose lays. They could slip on some of this wet ash. Not to mention, there could be ash pits that they can trip and fall into. You trip, your hands go into an ash pit that you didn't realize that underneath the surface is baking like a pig in a luau, and you burn your hands off. So they didn't follow their own manual. In addition to this, It is the department's policy to prohibit the construction and maintenance of fire breaks and fuel breaks and other fuel modification zones on apartment lands, except when required by state law to clear around its structures and facilities. Previous legal commitments that have been made to allow the creation and maintenance of fuel modification areas. It is critical to the protection of life or park resources or park vegetation 130 horizontal feet from a non-department habitable structure is capable of generating sufficient radiant convective heat when burning under red flag warning conditions to ignite the habitable structure. And in the Palisades, you have tons of flammable fuels all around the neighborhood, definitely within 130 horizontal feet. And they never got rid of that stuff, okay? So again, this is from the state park's own manual. This is 100% on them. They are even well aware, again, the conditions in that case law from the 1970s, which says that, they need to have constructive knowledge of the dangerous condition on their property. Here they are showing in ink that they know full well the dangers presented not only from overgrown brush, but obviously a recent wildfire. It says these ecosystems inevitably burn, either from natural or human causes. Buildings constructed adjacent to the park units in the wildland urban interface zone are at risk from wildfires. They are 100% aware of the risk. And here they are acknowledging that it's inevitable you are going to get a human-caused fire. So it doesn't matter that a human caused this. They're well aware of this eventuality. They say it is inevitable, okay? It's not a possibility, it is inevitable. I'm always saying that. So they're acknowledging that they have a responsibility to adapt to the threat of inevitable human-caused fires. So please explain to me how nabbing a human being who caused the original fire somehow gets them off the hook when this is in their own state policy manual. Doña de California, who's the perfect person to be commenting on this. Perfect person to be commenting on this commie art that this suspect, this arsonist was pushing. It says, burn the rich, destroy them. Man. Banner 76, how in the hell was the entity not allowed to work the scar with the wind event on the horizon? Yeah, man, it's sloppy work. It's just sloppy work. There's no other way to put it. Crone Ranger says, for all their shrieking about climate change, you'd think they'd be more proactive. Yeah, you would. You would. And I make this point all the time. Because people are always pitting like the climate change stuff against fuels management. But this is what's so frustrating. They can coexist, right? You can still do all the climate things. You can still shit your pants about climate change. Like if you think that it really is the end of the world, if you think that it is creating, bigger, more catastrophic wildfires and it's not the fuels, the idea that climate change is making the fire weather conditions worse should only hasten your desire to get rid of these fuels because it's showing that there's an imminent danger, right? That should only stimulate more activity because here they are talking about active management. Again, this is in Topanga State Park's policy manual. Natural resource management is predicated on the understanding that the department must monitor conditions and take appropriate actions to maintain these values. This is accomplished through the combined effort of restoring damaged or altered natural resources and a systematically applied program of regular inspection and maintenance, which includes the restoration of natural processes such as fire. They know full well that fire is a vital part of the ecosystem, especially in Southern California and throughout the entire West, right? This is nature's cleaning crew. We have normal fire cycles going back centuries and millennia, okay? There's nothing new about this. And as they say, it is inevitable. It is 100% inevitable right here. So if you know that both natural and human-caused fires are inevitable, and you believe that climate change is making these things more dangerous and more catastrophic, then you should be getting rid of fuels at haste, right? And they're not doing it. So this is why, no matter who started the fire, even if, whether it was Gavin Newsom himself set the park on fire or not, Gavin Newsom is still on the hook for this. And especially because he's so granular with always bragging about how he's 10xing all of the fuel mitigation work throughout the state, and it's not getting done. It's not getting done. And it's certainly not getting done in the most important areas, like around the Palisades, which is entirely surrounded by Topanga State Park. All right. So anyway, you guys have any other questions? I'll post some of the pictures from the lawsuit on my Twitter. So yeah, this is the guy. This is the guy with the terrible name. Terrible name. Eurotrash commie. This is communist. This is communist propaganda. This is the guy who burned down the Palisades. So now, what's going to happen? Obviously, you know, he should be charged with homicide, of course, because it was a high fatality fire. But beyond that, he's never going to be able to pay the $50 billion price tag on this fire. Okay, they're never going to get that from him. So, you know, the best thing that the Palisades victims can hope for is restitution from the other accountable parties. So the agencies that did not properly monitor and extinguish the Lockman fire, which includes the state and I believe the LAFD, unfortunately, you know, and look, it's tough because ultimately it's like, we don't want to criticize fire departments, but at the end of the day, I think someone maybe didn't follow protocol. Who knows? We have FOIA requests and public record requests for documents from the LAFD, and they've not been responsive to that. And by we, I mean like everyone who's been involved in the Senate investigation. This is not me sending a public records request. This is the U.S. Senate. This is like Senator Rick Scott sending it, and they've not responded to it yet. So there's still a lot of unknowns here. And apparently a lot of people were deleting text messages on January 7th, including public officials. So there's still a lot of unknowns. But at the end of the day, the arrest of this guy changes nothing for the lawsuit. All that it does is validate the initial claim of the lawsuit, which is this was a holdover from the Lockman fire. And so none of the legal arguments have been disrupted by this. All of the legal arguments were predicated on this theory of the holdover ignition, and that's just been validated. Okay, so this is good news for the lawsuit. This is bad news for society. Communists are a big threat to our society, guys. And this dude is clearly a communist. This is class warfare propaganda. So I don't know how we fix this, but don't burn your Bibles. Read your Bibles. All right? Read your Bibles. Don't burn them. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging with me on this impromptu live. If you have any questions, just hit me up on Twitter. I'll try to answer them the best I can, and I'll post as much information that I got. Remember, in this dystopian world of commies using AI to produce this commie propaganda and burn down our cities, the only way to prove that you're a human is to read the Bible